Welcome to another episode of The Bookie and the Beano, where we discuss the debits and credits of being a bookkeeper or an accountant today. I'm Kane Munro, founder of Accountancy Online and Active Outsourcing, and with me, as always, is Diane Lucas, superstar bookkeeper and owner of Direct Management. How are you, Di?
Hi, Kane. I'm well. Yourself?
I'm very well. Now, you are a superstar bookkeeper, which means, in my eyes, you're a very qualified bookkeeper. That's something I want to talk about today. The qualifications around being an accountant and being a bookkeeper, and some of the qualifications you need out there to, or in some cases don't need, to use different parts of software out there.
Interesting discussion this is going to be. Two different aspects, isn't there? Qualifications of our profession and qualifications of the use of software.
Indeed. Let's start with the profession, because that's where we should all start, because regardless of the software we end up using, as a trained accountant or as a trained bookkeeper, you should be able to use any software. Software's a tool, so we'll get to software later on. So as a bookkeeper, generally, what sort of qualifications should somebody have if they're going to be a bookkeeper?
Okay, well, in order to be a BAS agent, a registered BAS agent, so under the Tax Practitioner Board, you need to have your Cert 4 in financial services. You also need to have done a certain number of hours in order to have got your BAS agent qualification, and they need to be hours that get signed off by someone else. For example, I've got one of my bookkeepers in my team at the moment, so she's been working with me for the last 3 years, and she's got all the hours and experience and things like that she needs, and all she needs to do now is fill out the forms, and I need to answer the questions, and she should be able to be on her way of being a registered BAS agent. So, and then of course there's CPE requirements, 45 hours over 3 years, minimum of 5 per year.
Now, the networks you have to join?
So you don't have to join any networks.
So you can just do the education, become a BAS agent, and then call yourself a bookkeeper?
Not without the qualifying hours underneath it.
Of course, but you don't then have to join a particular
you don't
group
have
and be called a blah.
No, you don't have. So joining someone like ABN, for example, or ICBs or AATs of the
Can you break down the acronyms for us accountants out there who might not know what they are?
ABN is the Australian Bookkeepers Network, ICB, Institute of Certified Bookkeepers, AAT, Association of Australian Accounting Technicians.
So I always thought AAT was a travel agency, but there you go. Maybe that's ATP.
I think that might have been TAA.
Oh, one of them. I'm not sure.
Yeah, how old are you now?
Probably old enough to know that. But okay, so there's three. They're the three major.
They're the three major ones. If I've missed anyone, my apologies.
Okay, so you don't have to join them though.
You don't have to. It's not a prerequisite. However, having insurance, indemnity insurance, is a requirement.
Yep.
And that's probably it. Maintaining CPUs, I said. Yeah.
It's much the same for being an accountant these days, outside the fact you are really obligated to join one of the major sort of groups. You either be a chartered accountant or a CPA, or I think there's some more which are kind of lower than CPA, but I'm not very familiar with them as an accountant. I'm a CPA, and I remember that chartered accountants do look down on me as a CPA because the chartered accountants program is significantly harder than the CPA program. I've done some CA modules and I finished my CPA, and I ended up choosing CPA because it was more applicable to what I did. But yeah, even within the accounting group, there's different accountants who look down on other accountants based on the fact they went through a different education period. So yeah, it's an odd one how it works in that. But if you don't join one of them, I don't think you can actually call yourself an accountant.
Well, that's interesting. So being a CPA or a CA or a member of IPA, whatever it is, does that
IPA, that's another one.
Does that automatically give you tax agent status?
No, you then have to go through jump through the hoops of applying for a tax agency license, much the same as a BAS agency license. You need a certain number of hours, you need the qualifications, and then you need that verified as well. So, which is particularly hard if you're working in the profession as opposed to as an accountant. You can go out into industry and work for sort of a corporate entity as an internal accountant, or you can stay in the profession and work for clients. It's very hard as a professional accountant to then go to your manager or a director where you're working and ask for them to sign off on you getting your own tax agency, because it's really leading them down the garden path of, okay, I'm eventually kind of going to leave here because I'm going to get my own tax agency. So it's an awkward one to go down that path.
Well, that is interesting, because my bookkeepers, two of them are registered BAS agents in their own right. And of course, I'm a registered BAS agent under the name of Diane Lucas, but then my firm, Direct Management, is the registered BAS agent where we all work under. So the concept of the bookkeepers having their own BAS agent's number, they don't use it within their work that they're doing for Direct Management because it all sits under the umbrella of Direct Management. And yes, you could take the argument that with one of them
So
wanting
if
to.
your two staff are listening,
that's right, exactly. And it is an interesting one because this came up in our performance review with this particular member last week, that she wanted to pursue her BAS agent's registration, and I wholeheartedly said, absolutely, you're ready for it, and I'm happy to sign off on anything I need to do. But it doesn't necessarily mean she wants to move elsewhere. She's doing it for her own self-development. And that's the bit that I applaud. And so for those people who are out there who really consider that sort of further self-development as being possibly undermining possibly whatever they're doing in their own business, I don't necessarily agree with that. Yeah. It's a case of, you've sometimes really just got to help people, do what they need to do.
Yeah, it might be a different one, again, between accountants and bookkeepers, where there's that slight differential, where I'd imagine as a bookkeeping firm, having multiple BAS agents under there would actually be quite a good thing. Yeah, as an accounting firm, you only really need one or two tax agents to, again, like you, to lodge anything. So having multiple tax agents under there, kind of irrelevant from a firm perspective as an accountant, but I can see the value in having a number of different BAS agents.
Yeah, well, see, one of the significant advantages, I think, of that is as a registered BAS agent, we're covered by a code of conduct. And that code of conduct requires us to be fully aware of that at all times when we're dealing with our clients. And one of those is making sure that things that we're coding and talking to our clients about and all those sort of things is we need to be ethical. Yeah. And with that in mind, my bookkeepers, when they're asked to do something that perhaps isn't quite what necessarily should be being asked of a bookkeeper, they can quite reasonably, and if they weren't saying it themselves, then I would be stepping in and saying it, but that this is not part of our code of conduct.
Yep.
We will not put our registration online in order to do something that you think is relatively minor. And if you don't like that, then move on.
I think people, tax agents especially, are quite flippant with the way they deal with their tax agency, where it's actually a really important function that you fulfil for a client, and it's really important things which underpin you being registered as a tax agent as well. So don't take the mickey out of it.
We're very cognitive of what that actually entails, and I think that's one of the benefits of encouraging all team members to become BAS agents in the long term.
I'm absolutely pro further education for anybody in any industry or profession, especially so in the accounting and bookkeeping fields, given that things are moving so fast. Maybe having a slightly different skill set going forward is an important thing to develop as well.
Here's a question for you, Kane. Just further education in general, do you think that enabling your team to become further educated, whether it's relating to their current field or in software, should that be done on corporate time or their own time?
I think it should be a mix of both, to be honest, depending on how closely related it is to what they're doing. I've no problem if somebody comes to me and say, this is what I want to do, and then we can discuss it and see if it fits within what they're doing, what they want to do. I don't really mind. I obviously don't want to subsidise somebody going and doing something completely different, irrelevant to what we're doing. But at the same time, you have to have an environment of growth and an environment of education so people can naturally grow into something else. If they don't want to be an accountant longer term, happy days. Going back, I probably wouldn't want to have been an accountant when I was 21, but this is where I've ended up, and I like it now. Life's kind of like a mountain. It's a grind to get up to the mountain, but you have to keep sight of where you want to end up. There's a lot of different ways to get up there, and it's a grind to get where you want to get to. So holding someone back because it doesn't fit with what you want to do from a corporate point of view, I kind of don't understand. But at the same time, I don't want to throw money away on something which is not 100% related to business as well. If they want time off to study, happy days.
Now, it's an interesting one too, because we at Direct Management have got a what we call a professional development incentive program. Where
what does that mean?
Yes, well, the finer details are mostly fleshed out. But what it means is that if somebody's prepared to want to do some sort of PD and there's a cost factor associated with it, so for example travelling to the ABN conference, then there's a cost associated, there's accommodation, there's airfares, there's the conference costs themselves, and I will subsidise that to some factor, not the full cost. And there's other times when I want that particular person to attend something like, for example, a payroll conference or a payroll event or something. And so I'll pay for the whole thing because it's a really big benefit to us. Whereas the other aspect of going to a conference is it's a benefit to direct management, but it's also significantly a benefit to themselves. So rather than covering the whole costs, I'm happy to subsidise it to a certain extent.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from as well. And there's that definition between what is a work-related thing and maybe what's a bit sort of more wishy-washy, some part of it being a technical work thing and some part of it being maybe not related to what they're going to do now or down the track. What I really like is that a lot of accounting conferences and bookkeeping conferences are moving towards that freemium model where it's free for the attendees, but the sponsors pay through the nose to have a stand there and flog product. You have to understand that if something's free, that you as the attendee are the product. So you're going to get product pictures, you're going to get X, you're going to get X, Y. But as a small business owner, because we do fit the definition of a small business in Australia, that's great. It's free to send somebody to a conference. Fantastic. They'll learn stuff. They'll get slammed with X product and Y product, but they'll learn stuff as well. So that model's been a godsend for us.
And there's always an unsubscribe button at the end of the email.
There is. I'm sure that those people share around whoever's actually enrolled to go to them. And even if you don't turn up, you'll still get all the emails.
That's right.
So you probably do spend an hour or two afterwards unsubscribing from a lot of things, like you said. But purely from a cost perspective of forking out cold hard cash, free's good. But it's an interesting one. Harking back to you before about saying that, okay, you don't need to join the ABN or Travel Agencies Association of the World, ITAA or whoever it is. As an accountant, I can do my CPA, I can become a tax agent, but I still can't practice as an accountant unless I pay the CPAs an additional amount of money, or if I was a chartered accountant, an additional amount of money to get my public practitioner's license, which is a little course, which is kind of a fluffy base sort of sit in and just talk to other accountants about strategic planning for your firm and things like that. So I have to jump through another hoop before I can hang the shingle.
So in our last session, we talked about bookkeeper and accountant relationships and accountants often hanging it on bookkeepers for lesser skill set, for example.
Some accountants,
that's right. And it's a perfectly good example of why that actually might come about, is that when you actually look at qualification for qualification, yes, an accountant has had to do a lot of years in order to get to their status. But don't forget that there's a lot of bookkeepers out there who have more than a Cert 4 in financial services. That is the minimum requirement. So, for example, I have a degree, mind you, it's quite old now, but at the end of the day, I do have a degree, and at a reputable university. And so there's a lot of bookkeepers who have more than Cert 4. So I've got multiple Cert 4s as well in other things, training and assessment and other bits and pieces as well. So this is, when it comes to, the skills and qualifications of a bookkeeper, you've got to remember that the requirements of being a BAS agent are a minimum requirement, and more than likely BAS agents or bookkeepers have quite a deep set of skills. Yeah,
you should never judge an accountant or bookkeeper by the piece of paper or the number of initials after their name on their business card.
That's right.
The skill set's what's really important, be it as a client or be it as an accountant bookkeeper looking to work with somebody from the other side. So.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Now, when it comes to software, there's a lot of different cloud-based software out there that accountants and bookkeepers can now use. How do you pick and choose around certification? What does certification and qualification mean with regards to software? Is it important that bookkeepers have deep certification in particular software, or can it be sort of light on in particular areas? What's your take on that?
Well, I think the notion of certification has changed in recent years. Going back, old school, showing my age now, my first certification was in Reckon Account software back in middle 2000s, and it was a 3-day course. The idea was we were supposed to have a training and assessment qualification. We were also supposed to have a Cert 3 minimum, I think, in financial services, so there's no such thing as Cert 3 anymore. And I took that so seriously that I undertook those qualifications before even attempting to become a accredited partner with Reckon. And,
that is serious.
Yeah, and
hardcore.
Yeah, and then there was also a questionnaire to ascertain whether you were a suitable candidate or not. And I actually failed that initial thing. So even though I'd gone and got my quals, and I was absolutely devastated because I was so looking forward and so determined that I wanted to be an accredited consultant. So yeah, once I got over being gutted and then redid it and passed the second time, I then had to, pay out a substantial sum of money and be, sitting in this room for 3 days. And when I got there, I was then subsequently even more gutted because I was the only one who had the full requisites.
Well, that is how I remember certification as well. Certification, by definition, means you're certified to be able to do something or use something. As a CPA, I can certify documents and things like that. Like, I'm putting my name on something that's real. Where certification now is so flippant and wishy-washy and just sort of handed away that X person's certified on this and Y person's certified on that. It's kind of lost all value.
It has. It's totally lost its value. And I think part of that is also that there's a requirement from the software vendors to basically get bums on seats. They need
to sell the product.
Yeah, is that a bad term to say? But it is. We want people to say that they've got a certification in a particular software, and so to make it easy, we need to make it easy for people to be able to do that, and to spend 3 days and undergo certain prerequisite qualifications. The argument is people don't have time for that. Well, when I walked out of that sort of accreditation program, geez, I knew a lot.
Yeah, well, that hurdle has been lowered significantly now. Where it's all just about the software vendors selling product and lowering certification, so people can then go and sell it on their behalf.
That's right. So software certification today is not being an expert in the field.
No, I can understand part of that, where as a bookkeeper or an accountant, you're qualified in bookkeeping or accounting. So the software is a tool. But at the same time, I said to my dad, who's a tradesperson, he's a carpenter, he uses a saw. There's saws and then there's power saws. Like, I could use a hand saw, but there's no way I'm using a circular saw. Like, it's your tool, and learning how to use your tool is really important.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to see you've got all 10 fingers.
Yeah, I do, mostly. There's a few cuts and scrapes everywhere from digging up a deck over the long weekend a couple of weeks back. Yeah, at the same time, like, you still need to learn how to use the tool to deliver what you need to deliver to your client.
So, I totally agree. If you're a qualified bookkeeper or accountant, then there's principles that you know that should be extendable across any software. And those principles don't change. So you are using those principles in order to explore how to use the software.
Yeah.
Being a true expert means that you know how to make the software sing.
And sing well, like a budgerigar? Yeah. Or Frank Sinatra?
Frank Sinatra.
Okay, there we go.
And I think that's an underlying difference. For example, QuickBooks Online. Everyone who knows me knows it's my favourite accounting package.
You're QuickBooks die.
And I make the program sing. But and there's certain other softwares that, if I look at them, yes, I can do what's needed to be done in it because I understand the underlying principles, but I'm not comfortable doing it because I don't know the nitty-gritties. I'm not an expert in those softwares. But yes, I can work my way around it, and for people who don't know any better than me, then they'll probably think that I'm doing a marvellous job.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the problems with accountants as well, where they think they can use every piece of software under the sun to bring back what they need into their particular software. Because a lot of accountants still maintain their own ledger system and journal things in, which is crazy. But they think they can use each type of software and they can use them all equally. It's not true. Like, you can't possibly be
an expert in everything.
Exactly right. Because if you were, you'd be not an accountant. You'd probably be even the people running our country.
You'd be an integrator.
Yeah, you'd be a cloud integrator or something like that. But no, it's true. Accountants think they can do everything. Accountants think they can do that. They think they can do that. They think they can do that. They think they can be lawyers, and they can do parts of it. And if they spend some time doing it, they probably could. But they're not experts in everything.
I think one of the biggest skill sets that anyone can have, whether an accountant or a bookkeeper, is to understand where your skill set ends and being able to then refer on to somebody else. Whether that actually means referring on to an accountant or someone else who's an expert in that particular field or whatever, then that's where you need to be able to draw the line. And I don't have any issue at all once I've worked out what they need, for example, and I'll say, well, I've got, I'm really not familiar with what you're doing or what you wanted to have done here or whatever it is, but I will find someone who is.
Yeah, so it's about owning the relationship with the client, the end client, instead of owning
the whole thing.
Yeah, owning the relationship with the client and being the one that the client trusts, be it the bookkeeper or the accountant, or if you are a lawyer, being the lawyer who owns that relationship is the important part. don't be scared to outsource what you can't do or don't
Absolutely.
want to do to somebody who's appropriately skilled. Just maintain the relationship, and the client will love you more for doing that than pretending you can do everything.
Yeah, no, totally. The loving you more is, again, making this sticky.
Love's an important thing. Like being loved by your clients and being respected by your clients and respected by your peers, and you don't have to be loved by your peers, I guess, but being loved by your clients, well, they'll tell other clients that you're good at what you do, and you'll get more clients.
Well, ideally, that's the case, yeah.
Well, you should.
Yeah, you should do, exactly. That having the relationship there means that you can understand your own capabilities, that yes, I'm an expert in this software and this software complements that one, and I've got a deep interest in this other particular software for whatever reason, but there's a stack of other softwares that I have absolutely no idea about. I know their names or whatever it is, but I can, refer them on.
Yeah. Bring it back to your staff. What's the baseline level of education with regards to software for your staff? Do they have to be certified, advanced certified, super advanced certified?
No, isn't that really interesting? So Leanne's one of our, she's been with me for about 15 months now, but Lee came to me and she didn't know what cloud software was.
Oh, wow.
That's
cute.
Isn't it? Isn't that cute? So this comes back to what sort of people do I employ? Well, I employ for culture, for fit.
Yep.
I don't employ for experience, education, any of that. So she was undergoing her Cert 4, and so she's now got that, and she now knows what cloud software is,
Bless.
and she knows she has a little stack of apps that we use as well, and she's very proficient in those, because she's learnt over this period of time, and she's loving every moment. So for me, the prerequisite of having qualifications is not a big one, because you can always be trained in that.
Yeah, so they need the right base level qualification with regard to bookkeeping to some
Mindset.
extent. Yeah, and
It's
the right mindset, but the software part it's learning the tool.
Exactly, learn the tool, because she was working on getting the qualification, and that's the important part. So the underlying principles. When people want to start out in bookkeeping, they need their Cert 4 in financial services as a minimum, as I've said already. And the applicability of that qualification to real life bookkeeping, it just doesn't transpose. And so once you actually are working in a real life bookkeeping engagement or scenario or business or whatever it is, that's when the real learning starts. So even the underlying principles mean nothing until you can actually apply them to real practice. And that's probably one of the biggest learnings that you need to take away.
Yeah, that's really important. And that's universal. Accounting's much the same. The things I learned in university and high school towards accounting, I would never have used since. You learn a little bit in the CPA or CA program that you can find applicable to certain clients, but again, 90% of that will just go into the ether, never to be used again, and probably push out some information in my head that I'd really like to remember. Like, you just do a lot of stuff education-wise which are just completely irrelevant to what you do on a day-to-day basis in the profession.
And the best, I think, sort of experiences that you end up doing is that sort of self-exploration, self-teaching. Basically open the program and play. Just open it, pull it apart. Add something into it, see where it goes. See what the impact it has. How does it connect back to software? Another one that I always say is, just because it can connect, should it connect? What are the benefits of having it connect? So certification really, you can be certified, and yes, you'll probably get a place on somebody's website. But at the end of the day, you're only going to be as good as the experience you have around that software.
Experience is important. A sandpit is more important than certification. Somewhere to play.
Yes. Absolutely.
That is it for another episode of The Bookie and the Beano. We'll be back soon to get you another fix of the debits and credits of being a bookkeeper or an accountant today.
Bye.